I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Sympathy for drug dealers, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. President Obama in Newark, New Jersey today, touring a drug rehab center, touting his leniency towards people involved with the hard drug trade, who he says are nonviolent. Today, the first wave of more than 6,000 drug dealers released from federal penitentiaries all around the country after their sentence were shortened at the behest of President Obama. The publicly stated reason is that keeping drug dealers in prison for long periods of time too expensive, and the punishment does not fit the crime. The liberal point of view is that selling heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine is a nonviolent action. Nonviolent, despite the fact that in 2013, last stats available, nearly 44,000 people died from drug overdoses in America. Thousands more killed in automobile accidents. Thousands more contracted AIDS and other diseases, and are generally a huge strain on the American medical system. All because people sell narcotics to make money. Yet those people President Obama puts forth deserve sympathetic treatment. Of course, that is erroneous in the extreme, and many law enforcement agents are harshly critical of President Obama's early release program. That will continue. Thousands more will be released. Now, Talking Points knows the real reasons the president and other liberal Americans do not want harsh punishment for drug-involved individuals. Reason number one, the left firmly believes that police target African Americans more than whites in the narcotics trade. Therefore, the thinking goes the criminal justice system is racist. Reason number two, many liberals want to legalize all drugs. They believe it's a personal choice and should not be punished by society. Also, President Obama apparently thinks diverting drug-involved individuals into rehab is a better solution than incarceration. The problem is rehab never works unless the individual wants to get off drugs or alcohol, and many offenders, perhaps most, do not. Thus, the whole exercise will accomplish little in the way of public safety. Some convicts will inevitably return to the drug life, and they will cause a tremendous amount of damage. But here's the worst part of President Obama's foolish policy. It sends a message to young people, to drug dealers, to drug users, that society doesn't believe this is a dangerous and immoral situation. When I was growing up in Levittown, New York, there was nothing worse than being a dope dealer, nothing worse. They were outcasts in the neighborhood, considered scum. Now they're glorified in some places. In many circles, the local dealer is considered cool. The acceptance and promotion of addicted substances is a national disgrace. Drug dealing is one of the lowest forms of human activity. It enslaves, kills, and harms people. Yet President Obama is making it a priority to give folks who sell hard drugs leniency. Awful. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction. Join us in Washington, Charles Krauthammer. And you say?
Well, I say the distinction has to be made, first of all, between hard drug, between narcotics, and selling marijuana, for example. Also, you got to make a distinction between users and dealers. And there's one other thing you have to take into account, which is often when you get somebody saying, well, he was just a user or he pled guilty, that they were pled down. They were dealing, but the prosecutor decided either to get information or whatever to give them a plea bargain so it would look like it was only use. So I don't believe in blanket amnesty, blanket forgiveness for a whole class of people who are in jail. I do believe that if you want to do something like that, and you think that the laws that were passed in the 90s, incidentally, under a Democratic president, are too draconian. A, you change them for the future and you see whether your social experiment works or not. But B, you do a case-by-case evaluation, like parole. You might have gotten a kid who got in the wrong gang, who wasn't a dealer, was a user, or whatever. If there are good apples in there,
all right,
you
but
release
Charles,
them. But you got to go.
The stats
I wouldn't release a whole class.
Okay, look. The stats in federal prison, less than 1% are in for use of any kind. Less than 1%. The stats in federal prison are Hispanics are a greater proportion than blacks. Okay? So This is driven by race with Barack Obama. I know it is. I know it's race. The cops are hunting down inner-city black dealers. They don't care about the white-collar dealers. That's what's motivating this, Charles. And you know it.
Well, no, you see, unlike you, I don't have extensive psychiatric training and psychiatric powers to be able to understand exactly why Obama's doing it. And because I don't understand, or I don't pretend to know, I simply want to examine the relevance and the wisdom of the policy. If you want to reevaluate people who are in jail for crimes that we now think should not have big mandatory sentences, and that is the trend, then what you do is a case-by-case examination.
It's not the trend here.
I agree with you about the users and the plea by their small numbers. In fact, we went over that last week, and we agreed that the numbers that the left uses, saying, well,
totally
you know,
bogus.
These are kids
but are you
who are
going to
just
sit there
smoking
and
weed.
tell me you don't
they
think
weren't just smoking weed?
Are you going to tell me you don't think there's a racial element in this for President Obama? Are you really going to sit here and say that?
I think some of the left makes that argument. I'm simply going to say that when you tell me what's happening inside of Obama's head, I can tell you that I spent hundreds of hours with people.
It's what comes out of his mouth.
Hundreds of hours in a room with people who speak intimately, and I still don't know what's in their heads.
Is drug dealing an evil thing, in your opinion?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's a decision to sell narcotics. Is it not a decision? It's a decision.
It's also a decision to purchase narcotics.
That's true. But the person who buys it, I have plenty more sympathy for than the person who sells it. Okay?
So do I, and that's why.
So it's an evil act. Krauthammer and O'Reilly believe it's an evil act to sell narcotics, and it's a decision to do so. And it's a decision made on profit. Now, rehab, you're the psychiatrist, although you're trying very cleverly to put that in my ball. I would never be one, okay? When you are in rehab, you cannot be cured of anything. Doesn't matter what rehab you're in, unless you want to be. You're motivated. Is that correct?
Well, I did treat quite a few methadone addicts when I was, heroin addicts that we had on methadone. That was the treatment of choice in those days. And the odds of getting off are very small. Again, the key indicator of who's going to succeed or not is who wants to do it.
That's right.
But sometimes the choice of incarceration or rehab is such that it pushes some people into successful rehabilitation.
Would you say that number is large?
But that's why I think you have to have a case-by-case. You can't do blanket.
Okay. Judges are taking, and here in New York City, a police officer was killed, murdered by an alleged dope dealer who was put into a rehab situation, which he laughed at, and went out and shot the cop. All right? I'm putting the rehab, forced rehab drug dealer thing at about 10, 15% who really want to get off it. That's what I'm putting it at, based upon police reporting and doctors that I know in the rehab business. I'll give it a last word.
Well, that's a good reason to do triage. That's a good reason to spend time, manpower, and energy not releasing on the basis of the law that was used to incarcerate, but on the basis of what are the odds that this is a good apple or a recidivist who's going to be back on the streets. And you do that, I think it's worth the investment.
All right, the guy who shot the cop, 28 arrests, and the judge gives him rehab. 28 arrests.
Well, I think then the wrong decision was made.
Yeah, but that's the way it's always going to be if this is the alternative. You go to prison or you go to rehab, the liberal judges are going to take rehab all day long, and you're going to have more dead cops and more dead people.
But, Bill, unless you're going to give life imprisonment, they're all going to get out at some point.
Let them get out when they're 60. They'll do less damage.
So you think we should...
Absolutely.
So you think we should have a mandatory sentence?
Absolutely.
Any drug dealer gets out at 60, no matter how old he is.
I would give them federal mandatories of 10 and up, and depending on the weight of the drug. I feel that drug dealing is one of the worst crimes on this planet. That's what I feel.
I agree with you on that,
All
but
right.
I don't
then
agree
punish
with
to
your
that
prescription.
Extent. No prescription.
Okay.
I mean, you take them off the street, and in every town that's happened to, crime rate has gone down, including here in New York City. I got to go. Next on the Rundown.